The day was unusually warm for mid-September, the kind of day that whispered promises of a lingering summer. I returned home early, buoyed by a sense of anticipation, eager to surprise Laura with plans for our anniversary. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, laden with secrets waiting to burst forth. As I ascended the stairs, a faint murmur of voices drifted towards me, a harbinger of the storm that was about to break. The bedroom door, usually invitingly ajar, was shut. My heart pounded, an erratic drumbeat heralding the collapse of my world. I pushed the door open, and there they were, Laura and Mike. So entwined in their betrayal that they didn't notice my presence until it was too late. Laura's eyes met mine, wide with shock, then quickly clouded with a concoction of guilt and defiance. Mike, ever the opportunist, recovered first, his smirk barely concealed. Ah, the husband returns. What timely surprise. I stood there, a statue of disbelief, as Laura scrambled for words, her voice a tremble. This isn't. It's not what it looks like, I swear. The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so tragically my life unraveling before my eyes. Not what it looks like. I echoed, my voice a hollow echo of the man I used to be. Because from here, it looks exactly like my wife in bed with another man. Mike finally stood, adjusting his shirt with a nonchalance that fueled my simmering rage. Look, mate, why don't we all just calm down and talk about this like adults? Adults. The irony of the word didn't escape me. Adults took responsibility for their actions. They didn't sneak around, betraying those who trusted them. I have a better idea, I said, my voice eerily calm, belying the storm of emotions within. You two will need some privacy to discuss. Whatever this is, I've got just the thing. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the cruise tickets I had bought earlier, a surprise for our anniversary. I tossed them onto the bed, their fluttering descent a stark contrast to the weight they carried. Consider these a parting gift, my treat for your getaway. Laura reached out, her hand trembling as she picked up the tickets. You don't mean that. You can't possibly. But I could, and I did. With a final glance at the wreckage of what used to be my marriage, I turned and walked away. The sound of their voices, a mixture of confusion and desperation, followed me down the stairs, a bitter serenade for the end of a love story gone awry. As I stepped out into the fading sunlight, the warmth of the day felt like a mockery of the coldness inside me. My heart, once full of love for Laura, was now a fortress of ice. The unveiling of their betrayal was the first chapter of a long, arduous journey towards retribution and, perhaps one day, healing. The days that followed were a blur, each moment a sharp intake of breath in the cold air of reality. Work became a battlefield, a place where whispers and sidelong glances cut deeper than any physical wound. Mike, with his twisted sense of pride, made sure of that. I remember walking into the break room, the murmur of conversation ceasing as if snuffed out by a gust of wind. Mike was there, leaning against the counter, a smirk playing on his lips. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and stifled laughter. Ah, the man of the hour, Mike greeted, his voice dripping with a venomous charm. How's home life? Anything new and exciting? The room held its breath. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting, watching for a crack in my armor. Nothing worth mentioning, I replied, my voice steady, belying the turmoil inside. And you? Still finding joy in the misery of others? His smirk widened, a predator basking in the discomfort of his prey. Oh, you know me. I take my pleasures where I can find them. Life's too short for regrets. The audacity of his words was like a slap in the face. Regrets, as if the wreckage of lives he left in his wake was a mere trifle. A colleague, perhaps braver than the rest, chimed in, an attempt to break the tension. Come on, guys, let's keep it professional. We're all adults here. Adults. There was that word again, a label so ill-fitting in the context of our conversation. Of course. Mike conceded, pushing off from the counter. Just a bit of friendly banter among colleagues, right? But it wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. The room slowly exhaled as I left, the weight of their stares a tangible reminder of my newfound status as the cuckolded husband. The days turned into weeks, and the whispers became a part of the background noise of my life. I threw myself into my work, a desperate attempt to find some semblance of normalcy, to prove that I was more than the sum of my wife's betrayal. Yet, amidst the humiliation and the pain, a spark of something else flickered to life within me, a determination, a resolve. I wasn't going to let Mike's smug satisfaction be the end of my story. The humiliation I endured would be the catalyst for my transformation, the fuel for my journey towards reclaiming my dignity and perhaps finding a measure of revenge. As the chapter of my humiliation drew to a close, I realized that this ordeal had stripped me bare, revealing the core of who I was and who I wanted to be. And with that realization came the first tentative steps towards a future I hadn't dared to imagine yet. A future where I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my own destiny. In the weeks that followed, the raw edges of my humiliation began to scab over, hardened by a resolve that surprised even me. It was during this period of introspection and quiet fury that I found an unexpected ally in Sarah, Mike's overlooked and underestimated wife. Our alliance was born out of shared betrayal, a mutual understanding of the pain that comes from being discarded by those we loved most. We first spoke at a company event, a forced gathering where fake smiles were currency, and the air was thick with unspoken truths. Sarah approached me, her gaze steady, a stark contrast to the nervous glances I had grown accustomed to. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low, almost lost amidst the hum of conversation surrounding us. I nodded, wary yet curious. We found a quiet corner, away from the prying eyes and ears of our colleagues. "I know about Mike and Laura," she began, her voice a mix of strength and vulnerability. "And I want you to know I'm not blind to who he is, or what he's done." Her admission caught me off guard. Mike's betrayal was a public spectacle, but Sarah's quiet dignity in the face of her husband's infidelity was something new, a facet of this sordid affair I hadn't considered. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, not unkindly. "Because I think we can help each other," she replied, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that spoke of shared pain and the flicker of hope. "Mike, he's not going to stop. Not with Laura. Not with anyone. And I won't, let him continue to destroy lives." Her words resonated with me, a clarion call to action that I hadn't realized I was waiting for. "What do you propose?" I found myself asking. Sarah outlined a plan, a way to expose Mike for who he truly was, to strip away the charm and reveal the predator beneath. It was a risky endeavor, one that required careful planning and an understanding of the man we were dealing with. "We need evidence," she said, determination lacing her words. "Proof of his indiscretions, his lies. Something undeniable. And how do you suggest we get this evidence?" I inquired, the gears in my mind already turning, considering the possibilities. Sarah smiled, a wry, knowing curve of her lips. "Let's just say, I've been preparing for this moment for a long time. I have access to his emails, his phone records, everything we need to bring him down." I looked at her, truly saw her, for the first time. Sarah was not a victim, but a warrior, a woman scorned who had bided her time, waiting for the right moment to strike. "All right," I said, the weight of my decision settling in my chest. "Let's do it. Let's bring him down together." Our alliance was sealed, not with a handshake, but with a shared resolve to right the wrongs that had been done to us. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Sarah and I were united in our cause, a formidable team forged from the fires of betrayal. The chapter of our alliance marked the beginning of the end for Mike. Together, we would dismantle the facade he had so carefully constructed, and in doing so, perhaps find a measure of peace for ourselves. The days that followed our unlikely alliance were filled with clandestine meetings and whispered strategies, as Sarah and I crafted a plan that would ensure Mike's downfall. Our shared goal bonded us, and in our quest for justice, we found an unexpected camaraderie. One evening, in the dim light of a secluded cafe, Sarah laid out the documents she had gathered. Bank statements, emails, and photographs spread out like the pieces of a puzzle we were desperate to solve. "He's been careless," Sarah said, her finger tracing the line of an incriminating email. "Arrogant, really. He never thought anyone would dare to challenge him." I leaned over the table, scanning the documents. The evidence was damning. Proof of Mike's infidelity, of course, but also of fraudulent business dealings and a web of lies that seemed to ensnare everyone he touched. "We need to be smart about this," I cautioned. "If we're going to take him down, we can't leave any room for doubt. We need a plan that's airtight." Sarah nodded, her eyes fierce. "I've thought about that. We start with the emails, leak them to the right people, stir up some trouble. But we save the best for last. I have something that will guarantee his ruin." Her confidence was infectious, and despite the gravity of our undertaking, I felt a surge of hope. "What's the end game?" I asked. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "A public confession. We corner him, present the evidence, and give him a choice: confess to his crimes, or we go to the authorities with what we have." The plan was bold, perhaps even reckless, but it held the promise of the vindication we both craved. "And you think he'll go for it?" "Confess, just like that." I was skeptical, not of Sarah's planning, but of Mike's capacity for shame. "He will when he realizes it's the only way to save himself from prison," she replied, a steely note in her voice. Mike's a coward at heart. Faced with the prospect of losing everything, he'll do what he always does: look out for number one. Our planning continued into the night, refining each detail, anticipating Mike's reactions, and preparing for every contingency. It was a strange sort of intimacy, born of shared betrayal and a singular purpose. As we parted ways that night, Sarah turned to me, a solemn look on her face. "We can do this," she said, her hand resting briefly on my arm. "We can finally make him pay for everything he's done." I nodded, feeling the weight of our mission. "Together," I affirmed. And so, our master plan was set into motion. A carefully orchestrated series of events designed to expose Mike for the fraud and cheat he was. With each step, Sarah and I moved closer to our goal, driven by the memories of the pain we had suffered and the hope that, in the end, justice would prevail. The day of reckoning arrived with a deceptive calm, the early morning sun casting a serene glow over the city as if it were any other day. For Mike, it would be anything but. Sarah and I had meticulously set the stage for his downfall, and as the hours ticked by, a palpable tension settled over me. We'd chosen a well-attended industry conference for the unveiling, a place where the impact of Mike's exposure would be maximized. The gathered crowd was a who's who of our professional world, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. Before the final act, Sarah and I met one last time in the shadows of the conference hall. Our final preparations lay bare between us. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt. I nodded, the resolve in my voice matching the determination in her gaze. "Let's finish this." As the keynote speech drew to a close, we enacted the first part of our plan. Anonymous tips sent to select individuals in the crowd began to circulate, whispers growing louder as the evidence of Mike's indiscretions spread like wildfire. Then, as the murmurs reached a crescendo, Sarah stepped forward, a flash drive in hand. She approached the event organizer, a brief exchange, and suddenly, the screens around the hall flickered to life, displaying the damning evidence for all to see. Mike's face, previously flushed with the high of his own arrogance, drained of color as he realized the extent of his exposure. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a mixture of shock, disgust, and the thrill of scandal. In the chaos that ensued, I found Mike, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. Our eyes met, and in that moment he knew. This was my doing. This was our revenge. "Why?" he managed to say, the word barely a whisper over the din of the crowd. "For everything," I said, my voice steady, resolute. For Laura, for Sarah, for every life you've ruined with your selfishness. Mike's attempt to respond was cut short as security approached, the evidence against him too overwhelming to ignore. As he was led away, a path clearing through the sea of onlookers, Sarah joined me, her presence a silent support. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of triumph and exhaustion. "We did," I replied, allowing myself a moment to feel the weight of our actions lift. "He'll never hurt anyone again." As the crowd began to disperse, murmurs of the scandal spreading beyond the walls of the conference hall, Sarah and I remained standing, a sense of closure enveloping us. "This doesn't undo the past," Sarah said, her gaze turning thoughtful, "but it's a start. A chance for something new." I nodded, knowing she was right. Our revenge had not been born out of a desire for personal gain, but from a need to see justice served. In bringing Mike down, we had exposed the rot at the core of his being, and in doing so, perhaps we had paved the way for healing to begin. As we walked away from the scene of our victory, the events of the past months felt like a distant storm that had finally passed. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like ours to shape. The dust had settled in the weeks following Mike's public downfall. The scandal had rocked our professional community, leaving many to question how they had missed the signs of his deceit. For Sarah and me, however, the end of Mike's reign marked not just the close of a painful chapter, but the uncertain dawn of a new beginning. We found ourselves in the quiet aftermath, sitting across from each other at a small cafe that had become our refuge during the storm. The weight of what we had accomplished hung between us, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in the fire of our shared ordeal. Sarah broke the silence, her voice tinged with a reflective note. "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" I considered her question, the moral complexities of our actions a frequent visitor in my thoughts. "Every day," I admitted. "But then I remember the pain he caused, the lives he destroyed. We did what was necessary." She nodded, the lines of her face softening. "I guess I'm just trying to figure out where we go from here. How do we move on from something like this?" It was the question that had haunted my quieter moments, the future a vast unknown that stretched out, daunting in its possibilities. "We rebuild," I said, the words sounding more confident than I felt. "We take the lessons we've learned, the strength we've found, and we use it to create something better." Sarah smiled, a genuine warmth reaching her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. I liked the sound of that. A fresh start. Our conversation drifted then to dreams of the future, the kind of world we wanted to build from the ashes of the past. It was a future that, for the first time, felt within our grasp, not dictated by the shadows of betrayal, but illuminated by the promise of new beginnings. As we parted ways that day, a sense of purpose propelled me forward. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with challenges, but also ripe with opportunity. The journey of healing and rebuilding would be a long one, but it was a journey we were now equipped to face. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with a renewed vigor, determined to use my platform to advocate for transparency and integrity in our industry. The response was overwhelming, a groundswell of support from those eager to turn the page on the darker chapters of our collective history. One evening, as I sat reviewing proposals for a new initiative I was spearheading, a message from Sarah popped up on my screen. "Thinking of hosting a small gathering at my place this weekend. A celebration of new beginnings. You in?" I smiled, typing my reply. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The gathering was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a collection of individuals who had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. As I looked around at the faces illuminated by laughter and shared stories, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. Sarah caught my eye from across the room, raising her glass in a silent toast. I mirrored her gesture, our exchange a recognition of the journey we had undertaken and the future we were now free to write. In that moment, surrounded by the promise of new beginnings, I realized that our actions had not just brought about Mike's downfall, but had also laid the foundation for a community built on trust, integrity, and the unshakable belief that, even in the darkest of times, there is always a light waiting to guide us home. Months had passed since the scandal that shook our world to its core, and in its aftermath, a new landscape had begun to take shape. The industry was healing, slowly but surely, as efforts to rebuild trust and integrity became the cornerstone of our collective mission. For Sarah and me, the journey had been deeply personal, a path that led us through the darkest valleys to emerge into the light of a new day. On a crisp autumn evening, we found ourselves walking along the riverbank, the city lights reflecting off the water in a dazzling display. It was a place far removed from the chaos of our past, a sanctuary where we could reflect on the journey that had brought us here. "Do you think people ever truly change?" Sarah asked, her voice cutting through the serene sounds of the evening. I pondered her question, the complexities of human nature something I had come to grapple with in the wake of our experiences. "I think they can," I finally said. "But it takes courage to face the darkest parts of ourselves, to acknowledge our mistakes and learn from them." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately, about letting go of the anger and moving forward." The concept of forgiveness had been a difficult one for me to embrace, the wounds inflicted by betrayal deep and raw. Yet, as I walked beside Sarah, I realized that the weight of carrying such bitterness was a burden too heavy to bear. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I said, choosing my words carefully. "It means choosing to not let the past define us. It's about finding peace." A comfortable silence fell between us, the sounds of the evening enveloping us in its gentle embrace. It was in moments like these that I was reminded of the strength found in vulnerability, in the shared experiences that bind us together. As we made our way back to the bustling streets of the city, Sarah stopped, turning to face me. "I'm grateful for you," she said, her sincerity shining through. "For everything we've been through, for standing by me when the world seemed to crumble around us." I met her gaze, the depth of our journey reflected in her eyes. "I'm grateful for you too," I replied. "For your courage, your resilience, and for showing me that even in the midst of darkness, there is always hope." We embraced then, a symbol of our shared past and the promise of the future. As we parted ways that evening, I felt a sense of closure, a chapter ending as a new one awaited on the horizon. The days that followed were filled with new challenges and opportunities, each one a stepping stone towards the future we were building. The industry was transforming, driven by a collective desire to do better, to be better. And amidst it all, Sarah and I remained steadfast, our friendship a testament to the power of redemption and the unyielding spirit of the human heart. As I sit down to pen this final chapter, I am reminded of the journey that has brought us here. It is a story of betrayal and heartbreak, but more importantly, it is a story of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring capacity for change. It is my hope that in sharing our journey, others may find the courage to face their own darkness, to seek forgiveness, and to embrace the possibility of a new beginning. For in the end, it is not the challenges we face that define us, but how we choose to rise above them, forging a path of healing and hope for ourselves and for those who walk beside us.